Yes, and we're back. Welcome back. You're still watching the news review right here on Power Breakfast on Citizen TV with me, Fred Ndimuli. Let me introduce my panelists this morning. And I'll begin on my immediate right, Danson Mwashako, Member of Parliament, Wundanyi constituency from the Wiper Party. Karibu sana. Next, we have Pamela Odhiambo, a woman representative Migori from the ODM Party. Yes. We do have Kipruto Arap-Kirwa, Deputy Party Leader, ANC. Good morning. Good morning. And last but not least, Gabriel Muduma, a Jubilee Party strategist. Good morning. Karibuni sana.
Good morning, Fred.
We have a nice cocktail of headlines. Of course, the big one has to do with what happened yesterday with the Senate. That has been the biggest talking point, at least politically. But the headlines today have other issues that we need to discuss. If I may just look at the two dailies, the biggest dailies that we're covering. That's the Standard and the Daily Nation. On the front pages, very little politics. Although, yes, what has been happening in the Senate has been captured or highlighted. On the Daily Nation, on the top strip, Wetangula senators defy Raila. We'll be discussing that. The stories on the inside pages on page 4. But the biggest headlines there's a poverty index, 12 billion shillings down the drain of NSSF Tower, and a botched birth lays bare rotten hospitals. Part of a woman's small intestines left hanging out of sac after cesarean section. These are the top stories on the front page of the Daily Nation. On the Standard, yes, Raila fails to save Wetangula is highlighted somewhere. The story is deep inside on page 8 of the Standard. But the big story today on the Standard, the shame of jobless Kenya. 7 million, that's the number of Kenyans out of work. And they show also poverty index, the average urban poverty line per month at 5,995. Average rural poverty line per month at 3,252. That story on the Standard continues with a survey on the agony of 7 million Kenyans in search of jobs, and probably we can start from there. About a third of working age Kenyans are jobless. This is according to a survey by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. 7 million Kenyans are unemployed. Out of these, 1.4 million have been desperately looking for work. Now, if I may just get the highlights of the survey. 1.4 million Kenyans actively looking for work, 3.7 million underemployed, 19.5 million Kenyans are active in the labor force, majority in low cadre, poorly paying jobs. 25 million is the number of people falling in the working age bracket of between 15 and 64 years. Half of the country's working age population has primary level education, and 4.2 million working age Kenyans are not working but are in college or secondary school. It is a very in-depth analysis of Kenyan households as well. 1 in 3 households is headed by a woman in Kenya currently, and even in terms of poverty, they say that 30.2% of women-headed households are poor compared to 26% of those run by men. Another headline in relation to that, then we'll just look at it in wholesomely. Broke Kenyans would rather go to a shop for loan than visit a bank. Yes, sources of credit, merchant shop, self-help groups. The merchant shop, I think, is the highest. Banks and microfinance come way down there. Survey also shows that half of Kenyan children are born into poverty. That's another headline on page 4 of the Standard. The story, I'm sure, is also on the Daily Nation on page 10 because it's been highlighted. Poverty index. This is just showing how poor we are. Someone does a survey just to show how poor Kenyans are, and this is it, because it does help. On page 10, Turkana, Mandera, Samburu and Garissa top list of poorest countries. I think on the bottom of that, okay, I can see something that I may not be able to decipher immediately, but the survey indicates that about 16.4 million Kenyans live in severe deprivation, with rural areas hardest hit. That's on the Daily Nation. This is where we are, and any family or any person looking at how well they are doing, they do so by judging how big their wallet is, how much money is in your pocket right now. Right now I'm feeling very poor because my pocket has nothing, I think. But that is how every Kenyan will look at it. At home, you just see, okay, are we able to afford our breakfast today, our lunch today? Are we going to have lights, or will we even afford kerosene? That is how everyone thinks in the morning. So this survey, yes, just a reflection of how poor we are, is something that will definitely be discussed throughout the day. Let's start with you, Bwana Mwashako.
Thank you, Ndimuli. I think this survey is coming at a time where every average Kenyan is struggling. We've come from a very lengthy electioneering period, and I think this survey is coming at the right time, just immediately after the handshake, whereby the economy is not performing well. But this is not a surprise. We are aware, some of us who are our first time in Parliament, the biggest issues that we're facing is our youth who believed in us, coming to us on a daily basis, asking us for, connections. Please get me a job here, get me a job there. So it is... They are extremely desperate. And these are landed Kenyans. By the way, it's interesting. And this survey saying 7 million Kenyans unemployed. It is extremely true. In fact, you'd imagine maybe it is even an estimation. Because there are those that are in voluntary employment. These guys are landed, they're graduates, but they're doing jobs that earning peanuts, And I think this is a realization in this country that even as we do everything, we must address this issue of unemployment. As leaders, as government, every person in this country as a leader, we must choose to address this issue of unemployment. Because our youth are becoming extremely desperate. We're trying to solve issues of insecurity, issues of, when betting came in this country, everybody is talking of betting is destroying our young people. But indeed, it's because people are unemployed.
People are idle.
People are idle. So everyone in this country, and let me tell you, it even affects parents more than the youth. If you look at it, you take your kid, you spend so much for university education. You take your kids to the best schools. But they're out there, 3-5 years down the line after graduation. They don't find employment.
But when you talk about 7 million people, it looks like a small figure, but 7 million people not engaging in any gainful activity. Because we're not talking about people who do manual jobs or menial jobs for that matter. These are people who do nothing.
Literally, yes.
They're just idle. 7 million is a big number, Pamela. This is something that we should really be worried about.
Thank you very much, Fred. I think what this survey is showing to me is a drop in the ocean. And even if you can look at the plotted cases where the survey was done, it has still left quite a big chunk of Kenya out. Areas like Nairobi are not yet accounted for, and I think the highest percentage of unemployed youth are here with us in this city. Other places like Kisumu, Nakuru, and even other rural counties like Migori, where I come from. The other day I almost cried in the street when I stopped to fuel in Migori, and then 2 of my students whom I taught when I was at JKUAT here came rushing, and the guys are drunk, and I was like, what's happening, man? Say, Mommy, even a job, even cleaning your car, this is what this graduate was telling me. And I looked at the whole scenario and I was like, God, are we going to be serious for once and help these youth make sense out of whatever knowledge, whatever skills that they have? What I mean is, what my colleague is alluding to here is true in this country. I think sometimes we have spent a lot of time trying to solve problems which are embedded in something else. Like the case of drug addiction or this abuse of drugs, we quite often blame our youth or whoever is peddling these drugs. But you see, the frustration that our young people experience automatically drive them to doing certain things which we can avoid. My plea to the nation and all our leadership and everybody else, I think I've kept repeating that in Kenya, all we need is the right thing to be done, what I keep calling righteousness. Are we conscious that these young people, and even older people, they are not just here, have nothing to do? Can we come up with initiatives and projects, even if it means encouraging people to do the small cottage industries and producing some things at home that they can sell and make a living out of it? I think this is where the solution to our problem lies. Yes. Most of the time we have had budgets. Our government says we want to do this, and money is allocated for it. But often than not, you end up not seeing those monies and millions translated into some projects that can absorb our youth and anybody else who can do something.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of wastage somewhere in between the time we do our budget, the money leaving the treasury, and the reality on the ground. And I think this is something that we need not to run away from.
And we were entertained to a lot of promises of 1 million jobs a year will be created and all these things. But where we are, it means that has not been happening. Is it a lack of ideas or things that we can do? Surely Kenya has a lot of resources. Is it lack of political goodwill, because politicians have the capability to come up with projects and initiatives that could actually ensure some of these young people or people within that working age brackets are engaged in something gainful? Is it down to politics, or is it a societal problem?
Well, let me say this. I think there are a number of things that do not happen. One is that we press the wrong patterns. Why do I say that? There are even areas in the industry like agriculture sector which has been self-sustaining for many years, and what the government just needs to do is to give some stimulus for it to be able to move. As I talk now, we supplied our maize even as early as January. The rains have started. We've not been paid for the maize that we delivered. The fertilizer that was brought is meant to be brought in June. The one which is supposed to be brought in March has not been brought. So they bring top dressing fertilizer when we ought to have planting fertilizer. That does not need a lot of logic to understand that this is mismatched opportunity. The other issue is the transformative agenda. The government has done very big projects, which we do appreciate, but that's not enough. There are certain programs that if we did, we'll be able to transform society and allow as many people to access money as possible. The third, and really most important, is that practically in every county, there are many small businessmen who are owed money by county governments in the tune of 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. This is the money that transforms society. If I was paid 3 million today, I'm likely to pay my neighbor, to buy something from my neighbor, and that money will be in circulation. That's why you realize people are very broke, and they would rather go to the shop because the banks cannot lend you money without effective collaterals. So these are some of the challenges that we are faced with, and these are challenges we must confront. Let us not just have grandiose projects that will not have anything to carry from Interland to the coast or to any other destination. It is important that we think of projects that we touch the lives of the people. Change me, change the next person, and have that kind of ripple effect. That is where we've gone wrong.
Yes.
We are thinking of big projects of billions of shillings, when there are small projects that we can do that can change people. Finally, the issue Mheshimiwa Mwashako has just said, the issue of betting. It is something that is crippling our society. Almost practically in every center, you find young men betting with the hope that they can become billionaires. This is just a myth that we have created in our youth, that one day you can transform yourself from a poor guy in the corner of the street to something big. And therefore people are not longer looking for things that can transform their lives on a daily basis. They are thinking of 23 million shillings they can get, and they change their lives.
Once. Overnight.
Overnight.
But something could be said about also how we've gotten here, with even our school curriculum, what we're trying to change. That probably our too much focus on white-collar jobs has affected us to some extent. As Mheshimiwa Odhiambo said, there are graduates, university graduates, some people with master's degrees who are totally idle. You've gone to school, you did not imagine yourself now settling to wash cars, but that is what you can only do. Is it something, therefore, because quite a number of people are products of that kind of a system, are we saying that this is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon?
Well, Fred, a very good observation from what you've said. And by the way, really support the economic indices and the unemployment indices that we are reading about this morning. But the point you've just raised actually makes a lot of sense. You know, when we all focus on white-collar jobs, and you know, we just did not get here. One morning we woke up and we found ourselves with a huge rate of unemployment. What happens is we've come from quite a distance. And when you're talking, coming from quite a distance, you're talking about factories or manufacturing jobs or the white-collar jobs that you're talking, not marinating with the population. The population is growing faster than the jobs that we are able to create. When you look at many people look up to the government for creation of jobs, while we know very well that the government can only absorb a very small portion of the population and then leaves the rest to the private sector. A good example I'll give you. We are told a very good story about this young man who started JamboPay. He started a multi-billion shilling company now from where it's headed now, and he started it in a cyber cafe. He is a young man who sat down and realized there is a service I can offer to the government, and probably what are the value that we need to inject to our youths, albeit the fact that we need to check on our education curricula. Are we approaching the future with an old curriculum? Are we approaching our future with old tools? Those are some of the few things that we need to talk about. But we cannot always point fingers and say, you know, the population is growing, but we don't see a lot that is happening. We must be alive to the fact that there is a scenario that, or an environment that we can create. What is the environment that I'm talking about? I know we have a huge churn rate from our universities today, and I'll give you an example of my county, you know, where I come from. I know so many young men who've come out of university, and their fathers, some were graduates, but they entered deep into farming. Young men that, you know, the few that, I mean, it has been, several barazas have been held in that county, mainly in the constituency back in Mashambani. And these old men are concerned that every time their young boys get out of school, they don't want to engage into farming. Albeit the fact that it's a serious business that can actually, you know, bring money and also food to the nation. They want to get a border, and that is the kind of life that they want to do. So all the time you find young men gathered somewhere in a town, and it does not matter how much they make in a day, and if somebody makes 100 shillings, they're content with that. So I think we need to push the envelope a little bit, where we engage them, you know, to remind them that if it's agriculture, this is the backbone of this nation, and they can engage into it, even with the degrees that they have.
There are people who say, and just taking it from where Gabriel has left, that poverty is all in the mind. When you're talking to an individual, that poverty is only in the mind. In instances where university graduates, a university graduate spends 2, 3, 4, 5 years outside university after graduating, not doing anything tangible. Would we say that? Would we say that probably as a society, some of us are just not willing to take up any opportunity? We are only tying ourselves down to particular opportunities, and partly that's the problem?
Thank you. I think, maybe take it from where Mheshimiwa has left it. Indeed, poverty is a state of mind, as they say. But again, you compare developed countries and our country, you realize, yes, there are those opportunities. They say agriculture. Our youth need to really move out and say, let me add value to my life by doing what is available. But again, I'll submit to say that indeed, as a country, we must create these opportunities for our young people. It's more of leadership on the country rather than blaming these young people. Let me tell you, we passed the law that was passed in last parliament, creating a database, a national database on the unemployed youth. To date, it has never been operationalized. And in a small way, let me give you an example. In my constituency, immediately I got into leadership, I asked every unemployed youth, anyone with a postgraduate qualification, to send me their details, their CV, so that I can create a constituency database, whereby I'm able to tell with the Senate how many young people in my constituency are out there with papers, with certificates, but with no jobs. And I can tell you, it surprised me. Within a month, I received about 300 CVs. Within a month, and my constituency, my population is not as much. Undanyi constituency has about 29,000 registered voters. And I can tell you, within a month, you have 300 CVs, guys who are well-schooled. And I was asking myself, even as a country, when that law was passed, I remember it was sponsored by Mheshimiwa Sakaja, whereby we, like, as a country, this 7 million you're talking about, it's a figure we have, but as a country we have an opportunity, even in law, to create a database so that we know these youths that we're talking about, where are they, what are they schooled, so that even as we try to create projects for the country, we would, like the hospitality, whereby it's always said that it creates a huge number of jobs. As a country, we should pursue, you know, it's interesting, as I sit in the Budgets Committee, tourism in this country is given the least budget. Yet, we keep saying that the hospitality industry it has an opportunity, a chance to create million jobs. If you give tourism industry, like the next financial year, we'll give about 9 billion shillings. 9 billion shillings, compare, and we're saying we have a problem of unemployment. I think it's high time as a country we make hard decisions. If we're saying unemployment is the biggest, and I think this is a national disaster, then we need to look at which industries, which sectors of our economy will change this scenario. Tourism being one of it. Let us pump enough resources in tourism so that then we change this narrative.
We are dealing with the whole systems of government now. It would appear that it would be easier to look at this problem at that level.
At the level.
Yes. But
that is very correct. But let me pick it from what you just said and even what Honorable Kira was alluding to here. You know, we have said this thing every now and again, that agriculture is the backbone of our country. I think the theory here is that a greater percentage of Kenyan land is actually arable and can produce something that people can consume in one way or another. Apart from that, I think land is still remaining the only resource in Kenya that majority of Kenyans can actually access their own. And when Honorable was talking about this mismatch between what our agricultural agencies are doing from the government side, like now bringing the the top dressing fertilizer when we actually need the planting. What I mean to say here is, at some stage, we went wrong as a nation. That backbone, we made it look like it is a punishment to go to the shamba and work. Farmers would work so hard, but then they will not get a produce, I mean something tangible. In a nation like America, actually farmers are some of the richest people in the land. And it is given attention. You know, they are facilitated to have mechanisms of making that farming better. Not so in Kenya. So when we are talking about poverty being in the mind, the question is like what he's saying. The youth have not just woken up and thought we are poor. We have built it over a period of time. And this is what we are saying. We need to change our value system. We need to refocus. Actually, it's not changing. It's going back.
But you agree, it's how we approach even the issues.
It is how we approach the issues. It's not a lack of resources. What we have told our children, like I know when I was going to school, early in the morning, my daddy and mommy would wake me up and we would go to the shamba, then run to school. And we were not really made to believe that we were suffering. It was part of life. But at some stage, we are saying, no, the children should not go to work. This should not happen like this. And with time, the children have come to realize, who are now men and women, young women now. If I go to the shamba, then that means suffering. And I think we need to educate, I mean, unlearn this kind of thinking. And that is when a free mind, like me, I don't believe if I went to the kitchen to cook, then it is a suffering. It is a process of making my food. And I like it that way. I trust that food more than what has been made by somebody else. Look at our stores of food in the supermarkets. We get vegetables, like celery, all the way from Malaysia. And you're wondering, we are getting waru of all the things from Tanzania. I mean, where is our Kinango people? What has happened where in the regions where we used to grow this thing? And waru takes only 2-3 months to be food. Why are we doing what we are doing? We are challenging our government. Like now we are talking about food security, insecurity in Kenya. So we should make it a real priority and actually go out of our way to make sure that our people understand that we can produce enough food. Once we are stable with food, then any other little that you can make is a saving. It becomes a huge thing you can invest and you grow the riches, as my colleague was noting, that you don't want to sit down hoping and dreaming that you wake up one day and you are catapulted into riches from nowhere. I think this concept of education cannot be overemphasized. Our education system needs to emphasize the skills, yes, and once people get those skills, if we can even overturn the way of reward, where we focus on rewarding the skill and what that skill can produce, then we will see people melting down to actually applying those skills, knowing that I will get the kind of reward that I deserve.
This headline, according to a survey, half of Kenyan children are born into poverty. That's perhaps the saddest headline this morning. Yes, you could be poor as a result of the way you approach life. The resources are there, but you're not using them properly, or probably you're just expecting a windfall and they're becoming rich overnight. But for that child who's born into poverty, they have not done anything wrong. Should we accept that this can be a reality in Kenya, that you can just be born into poverty like that?
Well, I do suspect that the parents themselves are poor, and therefore they give birth to children in a situation of poverty. To begin where Mheshimiwa Odhiambo has just finished, the question of skill is very important, but the skill must also run in tandem with standards. When we embrace devolution, starting with Constituency Development Fund and now devolution, what we should be asking ourselves is, how do we mirror the skills that are on the ground? So either the projects that we are putting up at constituency level, at a different county level, are we meeting the standards that these structures are going to be there for another 200 years? You go to Italy, you find a building that was built before Jesus was born, but they are still standing, and yet there was no cement at that time. Why? They keep the standards. So what we should be asking ourselves is that, how can we arm those young men and women in the village so that they have the requisite capacity to do some of the jobs even at the constituency level, so that whatever we are investing in today is going to be durable? That is where we need to look at. What Gabriel said about the issue of agriculture, it is important that we look at the entire value chain and we see where do we involve the youth, not necessarily in tilling the soil, but they can also be involved in marketing and auxiliary services that they find them palatable before they move to the next stage, because the agriculture is such a long chain. From the seed to the food on the table is a chain that we can ask ourselves, where do we involve our youth?
And that's back to leadership.
Yes, that is the problem. Now, what worries me is that when I was in the Ministry of Agriculture, I realized the majority of farmers are above the age of 65, which means we have a dying population of farmers. Many of our children are not likely to be farmers in the foreseeable future. So what are we doing to transform them so that whatever farm we are leaving behind is going to be useful to them? Another important point which we need also to engage, some of the so-called areas of high potential, like the county where I come from, they are no longer high potential because we have subdivided the land, because we look at land as the ultimate product that I must put my name under that particular title, instead of broadening our thinking that you don't need to have land for you to be rich. That is the challenge. So are we opening new areas for us to give opportunity to our youth? Some of the so-called marginal areas are not so marginal, including the entire Ukambani. You can have a lot of food that can feed this nation if we have the right direction and the right policy. Finally, is the question of trying to say devolution is a panacea to all our problems. Devolution is just a process. It must be anchored on national policy direction, so that whatever we are doing in Taita Taveta is anchored on the policy direction from the central government, because food security is still an integral part of the central government. Therefore, the aggregate of the foods produced throughout the country must be the food that is going to feed the nation, and the government, that is their responsibility, because food security or insecurity is national insecurity. That is where I stand.
And very quickly, actually, before I answer the question of children being born, into poverty, I totally agree with what Waheshimiwa have said, and it actually makes a lot of sense. When I look at the county I was telling you about, I was so happy when Governor Waitito the other day said that he was going to move in to ensure that Kiambu does not become a concrete jungle. in estates that coffee and tea were actually thriving. That is actually it is a way in the right direction, because you realize, like Mheshimiwa Kiro here has said, there are various facets that the youth can play in agriculture. For instance, the coffee that you're talking about, the tea that we're talking about, when it makes it to the international market, who are going out there to talk about our tea and coffee? Who are actually transporting that? And when you kill that industry, at one point Kiambu, you remember, was the thing when we talked about coffee and tea. It was in Kiambu. Today, it is turning into a concrete jungle very quickly. And when you look at the grand scheme of things in matters finance, you will realize if you build let's say you build a flat, a set of flats, and you're done, and you've sold them, the economic sense ceases to exist, because now you'll have people paying rent. That's it. But if it's agriculture, you'll have a continual flow of people coming to work. And then again, as Mheshimiwa has said, it is, demarcated in various fields. You have people who are coming to pick that tea, you have transporters who are doing the same, and I know families that have been educated through that system and the societies in tea and coffee. Coming to answer the question about children born in poverty, you can see where it's coming from. Again, it is not something we are waking up to just realize it's a bang. And again, I'm giving you like examples. Places I've been and I've witnessed parents talking to, a girl who just finished college, not employed, and a boyfriend. They've just been dating, no employment yet. And guess what? They have a child. What do you expect? What do you expect? You're now looking up to your parents, the child's grandmother. Exactly. They are looking at them as like, you know what? They don't treat it as an accident, but really there's a human being who's just been brought into this country and into this world. So from the dreams that they had, guess what? I mean, your mother probably is working, your father is working. They are not going to stop their life and take care of your baby. But the best they can do is to support you. But you see, that support cannot be throughout. So already, through what you call an accident, if you will, I won't call it that, you've already subjected a child into poverty for failure to wait a little bit longer. So again, it is a society problem that we need to sit down and tackle. And again, Fred, half of the things that we are talking about require sobriety to look into it. For instance, when we are talking about our manufacturing, when you're talking about changing the curriculum, these are serious issues that we should be talking about. When you're talking about devolution coming in through counties themselves must start sitting down to, like Mheshimiwa was saying, creating a database. We must know how many people are coming out of colleges in this county. What must we do? How many jobs within the county are going to absorb these people? We still have that mindset of graduating coming to Nairobi. Graduating coming to Nairobi. For instance, look at the kind of agriculture that the young men and women in Central can do. Look at the kind of fish business that comes from Nyanza. Must a person, finishing college, must they run to Nairobi? Again, Nairobi. Change of mind. And I like what you said. Poverty sometimes is in the mind. I really support that idea. Anything else I have of it?
If poverty is in our mind, and you say then the shame of jobless Kenya, this, if at all it is in our mind, then it is one of those things that we need brain surgery to remove.
Not even that.
That's a good one.
Well, time for a break. When we come back, we take a look at the politics, plus what's happening at Kenyatta National Hospital. Now that you've brought it up, there was another botched surgery there. This time around, a woman's small intestines were left hanging out of sac after cesarean section. That after the break.